Okay. Okay. Let me do a. Where did my piece of paper go? There it went. Let me do a prep video for Prophets, Priests, and Kings by Alfred George Gardner, 1908 book. So I will talk about how I found the book at the back of the Proud Tower, Portrait of the World Before War, 1890 by 1914 by Barbara Tuchman. Other sources, Tuchman says that Joseph Reinach's work on Dreisig is the most outstanding work, and the most consistently informative and brilliant writer is A.G. Gardner. That's in the references. So this is his earliest book listed, though it does have several different editions. I think this is 1914 one, but it seems like it's fairly unchanged from the original one. And interestingly enough, this is a preface to the new edition dated April 1914, where the war starts in July of 1914. So, but you know, World War One. So it is a collection of there's no Christ-like figures in here. Prophets, Priests, and Kings is a seems to be this reference to the office, all the offices that Christ all fulfilled, and so these are individual men and women who fall into some of the categories, but yeah, aren't like the new Jesus Christ or anything like that. Let me just read you out. Let me just read out some of the quotes. What's my preface on this going to be? A.G. Gardner is a newspaper man, and he reminds me of, to make a more contemporary reference for me at least, is Jan Wong in the Globe Mail, where she would do these series of lunches where she would have lunches, sit down for lunch with a famous person, and often have would ask uncomfortable questions, would be very kind of see through the bullshit, um, would be a little bit skewering. It's like one of those things of, if you were a celebrity going for a dinner with Jan Wong, she's like this tiny, Asian woman, and it's like she would just she completely rip you apart, if so, not per, if that was your life. Now, A.G. Gardner doesn't do that. These are more just profiles of various of people who were alive at the time, a wide variety of people at the time. I will go through there. We've got Florence Nightingale, we've got George Bernard Shaw, we got Winston Churchill, we got David Lloyd. Maybe for my taste, contemporary taste, a little too many of the politicians of the Edwardian age. Starts out with a what's probably the kind of the most, feels like the most respectful profile, which is of the king of the time, which seems to kind of boil down to, boy, it's weird being a king, and he's the guy who's the king at this point is doing, he's kind of a workhorse in a way. It's not a position to be admired. But I think I would go off onto other things where you get some just deliciously written sentences. Some of them very biting, some of them very kind of celebratory on people. George Bernard Shaw, who is, and then, oh fuck, so, this is the thing I'm gonna have to do. He's like playwright, writer, thinker. I have to get the Wikipedia things for anybody I use. He is a hurricane on two legs, a hurricane of wrath flashing through our jerry-built society. He is the lash laid across the back of his generation. He whips us with the scorpions of his bitter pen, and we are grateful. George Meredith, writer, who he is very, very high on. His vision has something of the impartiality as well as the veracity of Valquez, something of the sovereign comprehension of Shakespeare. So, very high. The Kaiser, you get into the biting stuff. No man in history has ever had more godlike vision of himself than he has. Lord Northcliffe, he is obviously an elementary, a man who understands material success and nothing else. He's in the newspaper, so maybe this is why we get some very good bon mots against Lord Northcliffe. The one principle to which his loyalty never falters is to be on the side of the big battalions. He is, in a word, the stock exchange man in the sphere of journalism. So someone he's not particularly fond of, very much sounding like some of the business dudes who get into the entertainment and business and news. There's plenty of these people populate our news landscape of the moment. Lawrence Nightingale, who is like at the beginning, it's like oh, they kind of went through all this kind of romance, the angel passing between the soldiers in the Crimea during the Crimean War, but he has actually a far more hard-nosed view of her. She has a dominating will and dear purpose in all the acts of her life. To think of her only as a heroine in the romance of life is to mistake her place in history as well as to offend her deepest feelings. She was the lady with the brain and the tyrannic will, and in her we may discover the first clear promise of that women's revolution which plays so large a part in the world today. So this is the stirrings of, somebody who is like, this is a woman who actually, through her force of will, is actually able to make a difference in a very male-dominated society. You know, she differs from the fanatic in this, that her mighty indignation is controlled by her powerful understanding and by her cold, almost icy common sense. Then we get someone like David Lloyd George. He swoops very much the politician. He swoops down on opportunity like a hawk on its prey. He does not pause to think. He acts. He has no fear. David Lloyd George, he is not modern. He is momentary. So we get, kind of a more like cynical thing of like, okay, David Lloyd George, he's the opportunist. He's very good at his job, but he's very much an opportunist. We do definitely get kind of the anti-Semitism of the time. We get someone like Rufus Isaac Casey, which I should check and make sure he's also, but there's a couple of Jewish fellows in here, which you get stuff like the Jew, like the Japanese, is eternally alien to us. And it is the difference between the English mind and the Jewish mind in relation to British politics. The Jewish mind is essentially outside our politics, despite the sorceries of Disraeli, the British Prime Minister, Jewish Prime Minister. The Jew is a citizen of the world. He has no patriotism, for he has all patriotisms. If he is orthodox, his loyalty is to his race. If he is unorthodox, his loyalty is commonly less reputable. So, yeah, and we'll come to another Jewish fellow later and talk about that. We get Henry Chaplin, which I'll probably not use. Winston Churchill. So this is Winston Churchill well before he is the great the great leader of World War II, even before some of the more egregious fuck-ups of World War One. This is a young Churchill living in the shadow of his father, Randolph Churchill. But even at this point, Gardner says, Mr. Churchill indeed is superior to his father, for to Lord Randolph's flair and courage and instinct for the game, he adds a knowledge and industry his father did not possess. And, it's interesting reading this, knowing what happens next, and indeed the whole spirit of his politics is military. It is impossible to think of him except in the terms of actual warfare, which is really going to come true. He is a personal force, not a party instrument, and he will never be easily controlled except by himself. He has that scorn of concealment that belongs to a caste which never doubts itself, and to a personality that is entirely fearless, which, having read Hero of the Empire just a little while ago, that does really capture that. Just like, this is a guy who completely believed in himself and was completely without like personal fear, because he thought he was just so fucking great. We do get A.G. Gardner's views in these stuff. Like, the fundamental vice of conservatism is that it distrusts the people. Its fundamental policy is to hoodwink the people, bribe them, drug them, use them as tools. Our foundations are fixed, and Mr. Churchill's genius will have to find its scope within existing limits. There his detachment from the current philosophies, his impetus of mind, and his personal force make him not an easily calculable factor. And indeed, maybe not the guy that you would have pegged to become one of the great leaders in British thing. Again, we get Herbert Samuel. He's typical of his race. The genius of the Jew is the genius of taking infinite pains. He may lack inspiration, but his power of application, his mastery of letter, gives him a knowledge that is more potent than inspiration. He gets up his subject with a thoroughness that the Englishman rarely imitates. And then, yeah, you get the Jew rarely produces great art or great music, but he is supreme in his knowledge of those realms. It is nearly always a Jew who is the expert Shakespeare scholar, just as it is always a Jew who will decide the authenticity of a Van Dyck or a Botticelli. Again, we're getting what I think is just sort of the casual, ingrained anti-Semitism that crosses all of the culture at this point. Which, yeah, you can see why there was a strong pull of creating an independent homeland for Jewish people, regardless of what you think of the results of that. The Tsar. This is Nicholas II. Weakness takes refuge in strength, and timidity in terrorism. He will live as the man who made the great refusal of history. He might have been the founder of a new and happier Russia, the commons king in his youthful vision. He has chosen to be an autocrat and a prisoner in his 40 palaces, and we all know how that worked out well. Yeah, we do get like a little look in from an American, William Jennings Bryant. Now, the supreme fact about Mr. Brian is that he mingles religion and politics in the same breath. They are not distinguishable from each other, but are fused into one theme. His talk is like the talk of Cromwell. So full is it of biblical imagery and phraseology. Are you aware that the country has been going through a great revival of religion? He says. It is perceived that religion is a concern that has to do with the family, the city, and the nation, with business and with politics, as well as what is called individual life. What we are witnessing is a revival of religion largely concerned with men and women as members of society, which is like, that seems to be American life then and now for a hunk of Americans. Yeah, we got another thing. We got a thing with him and Rudyard Kipling is just like quite amazing. If you kind of, you think of people in history and you think, oh, he was a great man of letters, I'm sure everyone like at the time liked him. It's like, no, it's interesting to hear a contemporary talk about Rudyard Kipling, opening with, while George Meredith, Thomas Hardy, and Algernon Charles Swinburne are still amongst us, Kipling is awarded the Nobel for literature, saying, the goldsmiths are passed by and the literary blacksmith is exalted. Boy. So, just when you think, that people can't be as upset about Bob Dylan winning the Nobel Prize, we have this about Kipling winning. We do not know that Kipling, if not our king, okay. So saying like, Kipling in a word was the poet of the Great Reaction. Mr. Kipling is a precious boy with a camera. He has the gift of vision, but not the gift of thought. He knows everything except human nature. To read Kipling made men feel martial and aggressive. From all this is doubtful that he is of the immortals. With all his wonderful gifts, his swift phrase, his imaginative power, his intellectual energy, he is temporary as the moment's passion, transient as the moment's hate. So yes, on Kipling. Gilbert K. Chesterton. He's like a visitor, the writer, Father Brown, and the Man Called Thursday, which, things like that. He's like a visitor out of some fairy tale, a legend in the flesh, a survival of the childhood of the world. He's a natural foil to is Bernard Shaw. Chesterton It is not the human intellect that interests him, but the human heart and the great comedy of life. He opposes ancient sympathies to new antipathies, hates modernism and science in all their aspects, and tends more and more to find refuge in miracles and medievalism. Of his work, he is indifferent whether from his abundant mine he shovels out diamonds or dirt. You may take it or leave it as you like. It is all the blithe improvisation, done in a sheer ebullience of spirit, having no relation to conscious literature. He's like a child shouting with glee at the sight of the flowers in the sunshine, and chalking on every vacant hoarding he passes with a jolly rapture of invention and no thought beyond. So it's celebration, but it's also definitely we're observing things here, and maybe the limitations, and maybe what things will fall away there. And yeah, then at the end here, I've got this whole thing on, yeah, of the idea of Christ, and Christ alone is fitted to be the mediator between God and man. He is the prophet, priest, and king of the Church of God, which seems to be kind of the thing from Eusebius to various other people talking about Christ being that figure, and these figures definitely not being that. All right, I will. That is me blathering on. I now have to weld that into some kind of coherent thought about this book, but I would like to do that probably by cutting down savagely on all those freaking quotes. But those are the I cut down on some of them, all just reading it out loud, and yeah, I just need to cut more and more and more videos later.